past me like I was a piece of furniture someone forgot to move. He shook hands down the line, firm grips, practiced smiles, a quick joke here and there. When he reached me, I still had my hand out. He looked at it, then at me, and kept walking. He didn't stop when he said it. Old soldiers belong in museums, not boardrooms. The sentence hit harder than any physical blow I'd taken in my 58 years. A few people laughed, nervous but obedient. Someone else suddenly found their notes fascinating. No one said my name. I'm Spencer Walsh. For 28 years, I've operated in the spaces where decisions become permanent. Defense contracts, government compliance, and security protocols that never make headlines but keep companies standing when everything else falls apart. I wasn't flashy. I was effective. Hunter Stone was flashy enough for both of us. He took his place at the head of the conference table, still standing. "Let's be efficient," he said. "We're introducing a new leadership culture." His eyes flicked toward me. Cold. That means eliminating legacy positions that don't align with our digital transformation. Then, casual as canceling a lunch meeting, Spencer Walsh, effective immediately. No explanation, no review. Just scattered applause and uncomfortable silence. Hunter talked about agility, about innovation, about moving forward without sentiment. He packaged cruelty as clarity and expected gratitude for the honesty. Riley Davis from HR sat beside him, nodding at the right moments, fingers already on prepared paperwork. I kept my posture neutral, didn't interrupt, didn't defend myself. When men like Hunter are performing authority, resistance only feeds the show. He wanted a reaction. He wanted the room to see him dominate someone from the old guard. Instead, I waited until he finished and turned to Riley. Not to him. "Can you clarify something for the record?" I asked calmly. "When does the termination become legally effective?" The room shifted. Pens stopped moving. Hunter smiled, thin and impatient. "Now," he said. "I'll need the exact language and timestamp," I replied, still measured. That was the first moment his confidence wavered. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me. You know how shock settles into something that doesn't explode but waits? That's where I was sitting. What stayed with me wasn't Hunter's voice. It was the 28 years he'd just erased with a sentence. The memories came back the way they always do when your pride gets tested. Nights when I stayed until 2 a.m. correcting assumptions in presentations that would have killed deals by morning. Rewriting compliance language because someone wanted speed more than accuracy. Signing off on security protocols that prevented penalties nobody ever heard about. Those moments never came with praise. They came with paychecks and the quiet satisfaction that the work mattered. Let me tell you something about my background. I spent 15 years in the Marines before transitioning to corporate life, started as a second lieutenant, worked my way up to colonel, did 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. When you've managed logistics for 3,000 troops in hostile territory, corporate supply chains feel pretty straightforward. The transition wasn't easy. Grace Walsh, my wife of 35 years, will tell you about those first few months when I'd wake up at 4 a.m. out of habit and spend an hour figuring out what to do with myself. She's the one who suggested I look into defense contracting. "You know both sides," she said. "Maybe that's valuable." Turned out she was right. I joined Pinnacle Solutions in 1996 as a contracts manager. The company was smaller then, maybe 200 employees, struggling to navigate the maze of government procurement. I understood that maze. More importantly, I understood the people who built it, career military officers who'd transitioned to Pentagon procurement jobs. Within 2 years, I was managing our entire defense portfolio. By year 5, I was Senior VP of Operations and Risk Management. The title sounds impressive, but the reality was simple. I made sure we delivered what we promised, when we promised it, at the price we agreed to. No drama, no shortcuts, just steady, reliable execution. Hunter Stone arrived after most of that foundation was laid. He inherited stability and called it his vision. He stepped into rooms where the hardest decisions had already been made and spoke like clarity had always existed. Defense contracts I'd structured from the ground up became his strategic initiatives once he shook the right hands in Washington. I watched him take credit with confidence that suggested he believed it was earned just by showing up last. His resume was flawless. Top school MBA from Wharton, clean corporate titles at Fortune 500 companies, media-friendly sound bites about digital transformation. He spoke in complete sentences that said nothing risky. To him, contracts were formalities, handled by other people. Authority flowed downward from the nameplate on the door. But here's what Hunter didn't understand about government work. Relationships matter more than PowerPoint presentations. The Pentagon doesn't care about your MBA or your transformation strategy. They care about whether you can deliver on time, on budget, and within spec. They care about trust built over years of small promises kept. I'd spent 13 years building those relationships. Colonel Martinez at procurement, General Harrison in logistics, Commander Peterson in IT security. These weren't networking connections. They were professional partnerships built on mutual respect and proven performance. Hunter saw them as obstacles to efficiency. Sitting there, replaying his dismissal, I realized something uncomfortable and precise. Hunter didn't know who I was. Not really. He didn't know what I controlled, what I reviewed, or what required my signature before it became operational. He saw a position, not a system. A cost center, not a control point. That wasn't just arrogance, it was negligence dressed up as leadership. I opened my laptop out of habit, not panic. My inbox was quiet except for one search result I hadn't looked at in years. An old thread surfaced, dated 2 years before Hunter's arrival. The subject line was unremarkable. Contract amendment. Defense portfolio authorization. Inside was confirmation of delegated authority tied to our government defense contracts. Written clearly, approved cleanly, and never rescinded. Hunter's name wasn't on it. Mine was. I sat back, feeling something shift inside my chest. Not anger spiking, but anger narrowing into focus. 28 years of being the guy who made sure things worked, compressed into a single undeniable fact. He hadn't just underestimated me. He'd removed the one person who understood where the real leverage sat. If you've spent time in the military, you know what I mean when I say that realization didn't restore my dignity. It sharpened it. I didn't rush to do anything after leaving that conference room. When you've been in combat, you learn to wait for the right moment. You don't react to contact. You assess, plan, then execute. The facts lined up clean as everything falling into place. I wasn't just a former employee. I was the final checkpoint on $450 million in active defense contracts. Let me explain how we got to that number. Back in 2019, Pinnacle Solutions won a massive procurement bid for integrated security systems across 3 military installations. The contract was structured in phases: initial deployment, ongoing maintenance, and technology updates over a 7-year period. The total value was $450 million spread across those 7 years. We were in year 4, with $340 million still pending in future payments. Standard government stuff. They pay in chunks as milestones get completed, not as one big lump sum. Years earlier, during a particularly complex negotiation with the Pentagon, legal had insisted on a single point of authorization. Speed demanded clarity, and clarity demanded one signature for contract modifications. Mine. I'd reviewed every covenant, every performance clause, every penalty provision in those agreements. I'd argued for language that could halt funding midstream if conduct during negotiations caused material harm to the relationship. It wasn't dramatic language. It was practical. The clause was clean and specific. Contracted funds may be withdrawn immediately upon documented evidence of behavior that undermines trust or professional standing during the performance period. No warnings, no cure period, no committee vote. The authority sat with the designated managing officer. Me. Here's the thing about government contracts that Hunter never bothered to learn. They're built on relationships as much as specifications. The Pentagon has worked with some contractors for decades because trust matters when you're dealing with national security. When I first started at Pinnacle, we were just another vendor submitting bids. By my 10th year, we were a trusted partner. Colonel Martinez would call me directly when they had urgent requirements. General Harrison included us in early planning discussions for new installations. That level of access doesn't happen because of PowerPoint presentations. It happens because you deliver what you promise, every single time, for years. It happens because when something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, you fix it quietly without making it their problem. Hunter saw those relationships as inefficient. Too much handshaking, not enough automation, he'd say in strategy meetings. He wanted to streamline everything, digitize the human element out of the process. What he didn't understand was that those relationships were the foundation everything else was built on. Remove that foundation, and the whole structure becomes unstable. I confirm the contract, the language once more, reading slowly without emotion. Hunter Stone had never seen these appendices. He treated contract details like administrative noise. He trusted summaries and delegated the fine print to people like me, people he now considered expendable. To him, contracts were rails already laid, not systems that required ongoing maintenance. He believed procedure existed to support power, not constrain it. That belief had made him comfortable. It was about to make him unemployed. I checked the company recording policy next. Every executive meeting was captured automatically, archived for governance review and legal protection. Standard corporate practice that Hunter knew about but clearly didn't respect the implications of. The meeting, the handshake refusal, the words, the dismissal, every second had been preserved. Not just audio, but video. HD quality with multiple camera angles because our conference room was set up for video calls with clients. Hunter's dismissive tone, his casual cruelty, the way he'd enjoyed humiliating someone in front of 11 other executives. All of it recorded, time-stamped, and stored on servers that I, as senior VP, still had access to. I documented everything methodically, exact timestamps, participant list, specific language used, saved the file with a clear label and closed my laptop. Nothing impulsive had happened. Nothing emotional was required. Hunter thought authority was something you projected through confidence and titles. I knew it was something you exercised through proper channels and documented procedures. He'd removed me because he believed I was ornamental, a relic from an analog age that didn't matter in his digital transformation. In doing so, he'd activated the only mechanism in our contract portfolio that didn't require his approval or oversight. The penalties didn't care about intent, only impact. And the impact had been recorded, preserved, and documented according to protocols I'd helped write. When I stood up that evening, my hands were steady. The system was already in motion. I just hadn't activated it yet. I drove home through familiar neighborhoods, thinking about what Grace would say. She'd been through enough military deployments to recognize when I was in operational mode. Quiet, focused, working through a problem systematically. Our house sits on 2 acres outside the city. Nothing fancy, just a 1980s ranch with a big yard and enough space for grandchildren to run around when our daughter visits from Colorado. Grace was in the kitchen when I walked in, starting dinner like it was any other Tuesday. "How was your day?" she asked, not looking up from the cutting board. "Interesting," I said. Hunter Stone fired me. That got her attention. She set down the knife and turned around. "Fired you? For what?" "For being old, apparently. Called me a relic in front of the whole executive team. Grace has known me for 38 years, married for 35 of them. She's seen me come home from deployments, from difficult negotiations, from board meetings that went sideways. She knows when I'm angry and when I'm planning. This was planning." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to remind him that experience has value," I said, "and that contracts have teeth when you know how to use them." She nodded once, understanding passing between us without need for explanation. "When?" she asked. "Friday. Give him a few days to feel comfortable with his decision. 3 days to let Hunter think he'd won. 3 days for him to start implementing his digital transformation without the old soldier getting in the way. 3 days for $450 million to become very, very vulnerable." Friday morning came like any other day. I woke up at 5:30 without an alarm, old habits from military life. Grace was still sleeping, so I made coffee quietly and sat in my home office with the morning paper. The same routine I'd followed for 13 years, except today was different. Today I was going to make a phone call that would cost Hunter Stone more money than most people see in a lifetime. I reviewed the contract language one final time. Everything aligned perfectly. Authority, scope, trigger conditions, nothing subjective, nothing personal, just business executed according to the terms both parties had agreed to. At 8 a.m. sharp, I picked up my phone and dialed the number for Colonel Martinez at Pentagon Procurement. Colonel Martinez speaking. "Colonel, this is Spencer Walsh at Pinnacle Solutions. I need to invoke immediate contract suspension under Section 12C, documented professional conduct violation." There was a pause. Professional, brief. No surprise on his end, we'd worked together for 15 years. He understood that I wouldn't make this call unless the situation was serious. "Understood, Spencer. What's the nature of the violation?" "Public humiliation of designated contract officer during recorded executive session." behavior undermining professional. Relationships and trust protocols. Do you have documentation? Full video and audio recording, multiple witnesses, time-stamped evidence. Another pause. Longer this time. Martinez knew what this meant. We both did. Spencer, you understand what you're requesting? This suspends $340 million in pending payments pending investigation. I understand completely, Colonel. The conduct was egregious and publicly witnessed. It violates every professional standard we've built our partnership on. Timeline for paperwork. Immediate implementation. The violation occurred 3 days ago, giving adequate time for internal resolution. None was provided. Roger that. Suspension effective immediately. You'll have formal notification within the hour. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. No drama, no explanations, no debate. Military efficiency applied to corporate contracts. I set the phone down and went to join Grace for breakfast. Somewhere across town, automated systems were already processing the suspension. Notifications generating, balances freezing, dependencies being identified. Hunter Stone was about to learn that the old soldier he'd dismissed understood modern business better than he'd imagined. The call came to Hunter at 9:47 a.m. I wasn't there to see his face, but I could picture the progression. Confusion first. Surely this was some administrative error. Then disbelief as the numbers became clear. Then the slow, horrible realization that $340 million had just evaporated from next quarter's projections. By 10:30, his calendar had started clearing itself as meetings got canceled without explanation. Legal convened an emergency session, pulling partners off unrelated matters. Finance stopped sending routine reports and started requesting confirmations for things that should have been automatic. I know this timeline because I still had friends throughout the company. Good people who'd watched Hunter's performance on Tuesday with quiet discomfort. The veteran network in corporate America is smaller than you might think, and word travels fast when one of our own gets disrespected. Mike Patterson from accounting called me at 11:15. Former Navy, 20 years with Pinnacle. Spencer, what the hell just happened? Finance is going crazy. Something about the Pentagon contracts? Hunter made some poor decisions, I said. The chickens are coming home to roost. Good, Mike said. What he did to you was wrong. Half the company is talking about it. That was news to me. I thought the humiliation had been contained to the executive conference room. Word got around? Are you kidding? Riley Davis from HR told her assistant, who told everyone in finance. By Wednesday afternoon, the whole building knew what happened. People are angry, Spencer. You're respected here. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not vindication exactly. More like confirmation that I hadn't been wrong about basic human decency. The number wasn't delayed or reallocated, it was gone. Entire quarterly projections collapsed in real time because they'd been built on funding that no longer existed. Hunter tried calling it a technical issue, a temporary disruption, but every conversation pushed him further from that story. The Pentagon didn't ask questions about reinstatement. They asked for documentation justifying the original suspension. Legal didn't offer solutions. They outlined exposure and liability. By noon, understanding had arrived, sharp enough to hurt. This wasn't a mistake or a glitch. It was deliberate, executed through proper channels by someone who understood the system better than he did. The market responded before Hunter could craft a public statement. Pinnacle's stock dropped 12% in pre-market trading as analysts connected dots faster than executives could respond. When confidence disappears that quickly, explanations become irrelevant. People began watching Hunter differently. Not with hostility, but with calculation. He'd entered the week as a decision maker. By Friday, he was a variable in someone else's equation. The call to me came at 2:30 p.m. Hunter's voice was controlled, almost friendly, like we were old colleagues discussing a minor misunderstanding. Spencer, we need to talk. He started with incentives, consulting packages, transition bonuses, public acknowledgement of my contributions. We moved too fast, he said, offering practiced humility layered over obvious urgency. I let him finish. When he paused, I asked him to put his offer in writing. He didn't like that. The tone shifted. You can't just pull funding like that. There are consequences for the whole company. I responded with contract sections, clause numbers, and the exact language he'd never bothered to read. Section 12C, paragraph 4, professional conduct standards for designated officers. You violated it publicly and deliberately. Silence. Then he tried again, louder this time. You've embarrassed the company. This makes us all look unprofessional, I corrected him quietly. The recording shows you embarrassing yourself. I just enforced the consequences. That's when he stopped pretending diplomacy would work. He blamed advisors, blamed market conditions, blamed the Pentagon's outdated bureaucracy. Finally, if you hadn't overreacted to a simple management decision, none of this would have happened. I didn't interrupt his list of excuses. When he finished, I said calmly, "Your conduct triggered the clause, nothing else." He went quiet, not reflective, calculating. "What will it take to fix this?" "There's nothing to fix. The process executed correctly." He exhaled, sharp and frustrated. "You planned this whole thing." I answered honestly. "I prepared for it." "There's a difference." The call ended without resolution. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing with messages from board members requesting context, legal asking for documentation. But the questions weren't about contract interpretation anymore. They were about Hunter's judgment, about the recorded meeting, about why no one had intervened when he'd publicly humiliated a 28-year veteran. By 4 p.m., Owen Fletcher, the board chairman, had called an emergency session for Monday morning. Hunter wasn't invited to attend. That told me everything I needed to know about where this was heading. Monday morning, I drove to the office for what I knew would be my final meeting there. The same conference room where Hunter had dismissed me now felt different, smaller somehow, less important. Owen Fletcher sat at the head of the table with two other directors, Margaret Stevens from Audit and Charles Morrison from Legal. Riley Davis from HR was notably absent. That absence spoke volumes. "Spencer, thank you for coming in," Owen said without preamble. "We've reviewed the recording from Tuesday's meeting. We need to discuss what happened and where we go from here." I'd known Owen for 8 years, served on 2 strategic planning committees with him. Former Air Force himself, though he'd transitioned to banking instead of defense contracting, we understood each other. "Before we begin," he continued, "I want you to know that Hunter Stone has been removed as CEO, effective this morning." I kept my expression neutral, but something settled inside my chest. Not satisfaction, exactly. More like a puzzle piece clicking into place. "The board watched the recording 3 times, Margaret Stevens added. "What we saw was unacceptable by any professional standard. The public humiliation, the dismissive language, the complete disregard for your contributions to this company." Charles Morrison leaned forward. From a legal perspective, his conduct created significant liability exposure. The contract suspension was entirely justified under the circumstances. Owen studied my face for reaction. When none came, he continued, "We're prepared to offer you Hunter's position on an interim basis while we conduct a proper CEO search, full executive compensation, complete operational authority, public restoration of your reputation." The offer was substantial. More money than I'd ever made, corner office, company car, stock options, everything Hunter had possessed, now being offered to the man he'd thrown away. I listened to every detail without interrupting. When Owen finished, there was expectant silence. 3 successful executives waiting for me to jump at the opportunity to vindicate myself. "I appreciate the offer," I said finally, "but I'm going to decline." Owen blinked. "Spencer, you've earned this. What happened to you was wrong, and this is our way of making it right, which is exactly why I won't be coming back." I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 58 years in my knees and back. "Gentlemen, I spent 28 years making this company work. I'm not interested in spending whatever time I have left fixing what someone else broke." Margaret Stevens spoke up. "What will you do?" "Something that matters," I said. "Something built on respect instead of cleanup." The drive home was quiet. Grace was waiting in the kitchen with fresh coffee and a knowing smile. "How did it go?" she asked. "Just like we talked about. I'm officially retired." She nodded, unsurprised. We'd discussed this possibility over the weekend. Grace had been through enough military transitions to understand when it was time to move to the next mission. "So what's the plan, Colonel?" she asked, using my old rank with affection. "Remember Jack Morrison from my old unit? The one who started that security consulting firm in Virginia? The one with the Marine tattoo and the 3 daughters? That's him. He called me Saturday. Says there's real money in helping veteran-owned businesses navigate government contracts. Apparently word got around about what happened here." Grace smiled. "The network strikes again." That afternoon, I started making calls to old military contacts who'd transitioned into civilian consulting. By the end of the week, I had the framework for Walsh Strategic Consulting, a firm focused on helping veteran-owned businesses navigate the complex world of government procurement. The work isn't dramatic. It's methodical, respectful, and profitable. My clients understand the value of experience because they've earned it themselves. When I explain contract language, they listen. When I suggest relationship-building strategies, they follow through. No one calls me a relic or suggests I belong in a museum. They call me when they need results. 3 months later, I was in my new office, a small suite in a converted warehouse that houses 6 veteran-owned businesses, when Mike Patterson called. "Spencer, thought you'd want to know. Hunter Stone landed somewhere new." "Good for him," I said, meaning it. "Everyone deserves a second chance." "Yeah, well, might not be so good. He's trying to implement the same digital transformation strategy that got him in trouble here. Word is, his new board is already asking questions about his previous experience. I didn't ask for details. Hunter Stone was no longer my problem to solve or my victory to celebrate." "How are things at Pinnacle?" I asked instead. "Better." Owen Fletcher took over as interim CEO, brought in someone from outside for permanent placement, someone who actually understands government work. The Pentagon renewed our contracts last month. That made me smile. Pinnacle Solutions would survive and probably thrive under leadership that understood what it took to maintain those critical relationships. And Mike? Thanks for supporting me during all that. It meant something. You kidding? Half the company wanted to cheer when we heard what you did. Guy had it coming. These days, I wake up without an alarm. Spend mornings with my 2 grandchildren when our daughter visits from Colorado. Work with clients who appreciate what I bring to the table instead of tolerating it. Last week, I helped a small marine-owned logistics company win their first major government contract, worth $15 million over 3 years. When they got the confirmation call, the owner, a former gunnery sergeant named Torres, actually cried. "This changes everything for my family," he told me. "That's the work that matters now. Not ego or vindication or proving points, just helping people who've served their country continue serving in civilian life." Grace and I are planning a road trip this fall, visiting national parks we never had time to see during the busy years, taking our time, stopping wherever looks interesting. The lesson wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about understanding your worth and protecting it quietly, professionally, and completely. Real power doesn't announce itself with volume or titles. It executes when necessary, then moves on to more important things. Like teaching young veterans how to read contract language. Like building something that lasts, instead of something that just looks impressive. Hunter Stone taught me that dignity isn't something you demand in the moment. It's something you build into your work long before anyone tests it. I'm grateful for the lesson, even if I wouldn't recommend his teaching methods. Sometimes the greatest victory is walking away with your integrity intact, knowing that the system will correct itself without your need to stick around and watch it happen. Real power isn't about getting even. It's about building something better, while the people who underestimated you are still trying to figure out what went wrong.